Okay, and where in the heck has that team been for the last week? What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where, go figure, the Kraken lose 3 straight games to two of the worst teams in the NHL, or at least we thought they were two of the worst teams in the NHL, and then they go and beat one of the best in Carolina, their first win in Carolina in franchise history, 4-2, and looked fairly dominant in doing it. So yeah, at this point, I don't really know what to think of this team. They just show up and it's a completely different team from one week to the next. I would say one game to the next, but they do at least seem to be consistent over the course of a few days in a row, and then something flips and it's a whole new team, usually at the end of a homestand or road trip. We saw it coming out of that last East Coast road trip. They looked completely inept, especially when it came to scoring. Come home and they rattle off 5 wins in 6 games, and then whatever this mess has been around Thanksgiving. Now they go out on the road again against some good teams in the East, and we're back to winning games and looking like a good team. And not just looking generally like a good team, though they were that, but more specifically looking very good in their own end of the ice again, which specifically is the place where things had been the most of a disaster, the most of a mess here over this last week that cost them those 6 points that they easily could have had against the Ducks and Sharks. Suddenly they just go out against the Hurricanes, one of the best teams in the NHL, in Carolina, and while the Hurricanes are on a bit of a cold streak of their own, they hold one of the highest volume shooting teams in the NHL to 11 shots on goal until the final minutes when Carolina eventually goes empty net, and then racks up 8 shots in the last couple minutes, though most of them are from well out and not particularly dangerous. Which, as a side note, does turn out to be just enough to make this the second fewest shots on goal Carolina has had in a game so far this season, with the still lowest being 18 against the Penguins. And while it would have been fun to be the team to hold them to the fewest shots on goal in a game, it does preserve a weird little quirky stat with the Hurricanes that I thought was kind of amusing, where that 18-shot game that they had against the Penguins, they won 5-1. Meanwhile, the most shots they've had in a game so far this season was 50 against the Utah Hockey Club, a game that they lost. So obviously shot quantity isn't always everything, though giving up 5 goals on 18 shots is pretty rough, and kind of a good depiction of how the Penguins season has gone so far. But we're getting off track. Getting back to this game for the Kraken, yeah, it right out of the gates is just a completely different looking team. I mean, for one, the lines were completely put into a blender and spat out with lines that we'd never even seen before. Aside from one, they do keep the one line that had been playing well throughout this last week back together, or they put them back together. They had been apart for a game. But once again, Wright finds Bjorkstrand and Tolvanen on his wing, so that line stays together, gets put back together, however you want to look at it, and they had another pretty good game, so I'd imagine they will continue to get to play with each other for a little while. The rest of the lines, though, yeah, just nothing even remotely like what we've seen so far. And we'll go by centers because I honestly don't even know which of these lines is which as far as number is concerned. Beniers, who's had McCann and Burakovsky on his wings now for quite a while. Burakovsky doesn't even play in this game. He's a healthy scratch after just 3 points in the month of November, I'm pretty sure it was. So pretty rough month for Burakovsky, and while I did feel like he was starting to play a lot better on that line, obviously you have to make some changes when the last 3 games, well, went the way that they did. So instead, Beniers gets 2 completely new wingers in Schwartz and Gord. Yes, Gord as a winger here for Beniers, not centering a line in this game, as the other 2 remaining centers would be Stevenson, obviously still centering a line. This time he's got McCann and Tanev, another fairly curious line. I mean, I suppose McCann makes sense. Stevenson, more of a playmaker, passer, first type of player, and McCann, obviously, we know has that great shot, and then I guess Tanev's just out there to create chaos. Maybe the thought was to just send Tanev in like a wrecking ball on the forecheck. He frees up the puck for Stevenson to go get, and then he gets it to McCann for the shot. It didn't really end up working out that way for that line in this game, but maybe that's the thought process, or maybe it's just throw 3 guys out there and it can't possibly be worse than the last few games. And then, of course, the last line, which I think we can pretty safely call the 4th line, would be Mitchell Stevens centering Cartier and Winterton. And I'll be the first to admit that looking at the lines going into this game, to me it seemed like something that you just throw out there to show that you're trying to mix things up to get something to work. It would go horribly for a game and they'd go back to some more normal looking lines, but based on how things went in this game, it's certainly not going to change, I would imagine, for the next game, and then we'll see how things go in New York and New Jersey. But it wasn't just the forward end where things were different in this game for the Kraken, as there was a little bit of a mix-up on the defensive end as well. Obviously nowhere near as much, there's fewer options and fewer players. And especially with the pairing of Larson and Dunn now that he's back, sticking together as they have pretty much since day one of the franchise, that then left, fairly few options. They put Alexiak back with Montour, which to me seemed the obvious choice. I can see what they were trying to get to with Evans and Montour, two very good players, obviously different points in their career, but two offensive upside defensemen that can create things in transition and where things have been going offensively. Yeah, maybe that's something that you were looking to get a little bit more out of, but it did then force you to put Alexiak and Borgen together, which, although it's had some success in the past, it has been brutal this season so far. That pairing, for whatever reason, has looked the worst it ever has, and it kind of was on a decline towards the end of last season as well. So they get Alexiak back with Montour, where Alexiak has looked fantastic so far this season on the other side of Montour, and then Evans ends up taking the seat so that Mahura can come back in and be alongside Borgen. Now, I don't think that Evans will be sitting out too many games, but with how this game went, maybe he takes one more seat and they don't mess with things too much after how they played in this game. And as we get into the game itself, it didn't take long at all for the Kraken to start reaping the rewards of these changes made by the coaching staff. I guess I and we would be the coping staff, but the coaching staff makes the changes coming into this game, and the Kraken take advantage right away. 19 seconds into the game, it's that Beniers line with Schwartz and Gord that make it happen. Beniers, a good play in the defensive end along the boards to start the breakout the other way. Gord gets it up across the neutral zone to Schwartz, who one-touch passes it to himself as he splits the defenders, catching them both a bit flat-footed and on their heels. Gets in on the net, fires off a shot, and it looked like it had been stopped, but it turns out it went clean into the net. Schwartz takes a tumble into the boards. Fortunately, he was okay. Gets up, and the Kraken skate away with a 1-0 lead 19 seconds in. Schwartz is 6th of the season as both Beniers and Gord pick up their 8th assist each. Just a few offensively uneventful minutes later, though, the Canes would get it right back on one of the few defensive mistakes the Kraken made in this game, although you could make a case for this being two mistakes in one, as it's a turnover in the Kraken end. It actually starts with Decord getting a pass up to Dunn. Nothing wrong there. A good start to the breakout from Decord, active as always in playing the puck. Dunn, though, then throws it from the boards up to right in the middle of the defensive end as he cuts up ice to start the breakout. And while it is a pass that leads right, maybe a little bit more than you'd ideally like to see tape to tape, right has to reach a little bit for it. It's still one that Wright definitely needs to get certainly more of, if not just cleanly receive that pass. Instead, it ends up going under his stick. He only gets a piece of it. It goes right to Marty Necas, and, well, he's leading the NHL in points so far this season, so it's easy to say that things are not going to go well from here, especially considering the other half of this is that the Kraken completely lose track of, well, really two Carolina Hurricanes, as by the time this goal goes in, the two closest players to Decord are both wearing black sweaters. The one that gets it on his stick, though, he's got the entire middle of the ice to himself. He just goes from one side of Decord to the other, and Decord maybe a little bit out of position as he probably wasn't expecting the puck to be back in his face that quickly. He just leaves a little bit too much of the far post available. It gets hooked in around his foot to give the Canes that goal to tie the game up there just around the 5-minute mark. Thankfully, at least for the Kraken, this one or two or maybe just series of blunders in their own end of the ice that lead to this first Carolina goal do turn out to be a bit of an outlier, not just in this period, but really the game as a whole. It does cost them, but because it was early in the period, it started to probably make you feel a bit nervous that the Kraken were slipping right back into what caused them problems against the Sharks and Ducks. They are able to shore things up in the defensive end and really limit Carolina's chances, as by the end of the first period, a pretty uneventful, low-event first period. You could have been forgiven for thinking that the Kraken were playing the Kings with how low-event this first period was. At the end of it, the Canes only have 5 shots on goal and the Kraken 6. So, yeah, maybe you want to create a little bit more offensively, but you did score on your first shot, and honestly, after how the last week went, I think you're feeling pretty good coming out of that first period, only giving up the 5 shots, and only one of them was a particularly dangerous one. And then, lo and behold, as we start the second period, the Kraken just kind of take over the game from there, or at least a few minutes into the second. The first couple minutes of the second period are kind of more the same from the first. But the Kraken eventually get momentum and really never give it up over this second frame, as they actually managed to improve on both ends of the ice from the first period here in the second, stifling Carolina's offense even more than they did in the first, only giving up 2 more shots on goal throughout the entire second period. And back the other way, they're rattling off shot after shot. By the midway point of the second period, the Kraken were out shooting the Canes in this period 8-1, and that really didn't stop as the rest of the period went along. One of those 8 shots, though, does end up making a big difference, as it gives the Kraken a 2-1 lead. The play starts with a great defensive play in the neutral zone, or maybe it was still in the Kraken end of the ice. Either way, it's the right line out there, and Bjorkstrand in particular, who makes the good defensive play, starts the breakout. The pass gets up to the Carolina blue line, where it looks like they might turn it over, so maybe not the cleanest transition ever, but Wright's able to prevent the turnover. Eventually, Bjorkstrand ends up back with the puck as he circles around both Wright and Tolvanen, and then fires a pass across the blue line as he enters the offensive end to Dunn. Dunn quickly gets it back up to Bjorkstrand, who split the defense in all alone. He fires off the shot, and it's saved, but the rebound comes back out. Tolvanen, following the play in, fires off a second shot and buries that one into the top corner to give the Kraken the 2-1 lead. A great play all around by these three. Wright gets a little piece of it. I mean, he doesn't get a point, as the assists go to Bjorkstrand, who gets the first shot and rebound, and then obviously Dunn, who set Bjorkstrand loose. But just a great play from the 3 of those guys on that line, and also Dunn stepping up into the play as well, entering the offensive end. And then obviously finished with some great awareness by Golvanen to step up into the play and look for that rebound, going right down the slot behind Bjorkstrand, rather than going off on a change, as this was the end of what had been a very productive but also fairly lengthy shift for that line. Again, the Kraken would continue to press throughout the rest of the second period, aided in part by 2 power plays they would get late in it, one of which they do almost score on a couple of occasions, got a couple of good chances in tight. Nice saves were made, so the Kraken don't capitalize on the first one. The second power play, I think they get a shot, maybe 2 on net, but it wasn't a particularly good-looking power play, which makes it kind of an average power play for the Kraken, unfortunately. So we head to the second, with the Kraken still maintaining a 1-goal lead in spite of outshooting Carolina, I think 2-1 at this point. The shots were somewhere in the neighborhood of 15-7. So don't get me wrong, you're certainly feeling great about how the Kraken have played so far in this game, especially relative to how they've been playing for the last week or 2. But it still does leave that potential for all sorts of extra frustration, that although the Kraken finally do play a great game, well, now all it takes is 1 or 2 shots and it's all for nothing. As we start the third period, although I said from the start of the second the Kraken kind of took over, the third period's kind of back and forth, but eventually Carolina gets their first power play of the game, which comes on a hand over the puck in the crease from Mahura. Puck ends up squeaking through Decord. Mahura makes a nice heads-up play to try to shove it into Decord, but in so doing, he put his hand over it while it was in the crease, which you're not allowed to do unless you're the goaltender, but putting an open hand over the puck is a big no-no in the crease. You can push the puck with an open hand, so Mahura could have slid the puck into Decord so he could freeze it, which I think is what he's trying to do there, and honestly, the replay makes it look a little bit more that that's what Mahura did, but you can also clearly see what the officials saw of Mahura getting his hand on it, then the puck just disappears, so I don't fault them too much for making the call. Mahura goes to the box, and unfortunately, the special teams strike again for the Kraken. They go 0 for 2 to end the second period on the power play, and then halfway through this Carolina power play, the penalty kill lets one in. Look, the Carolina power play has been going hot all season, especially when Necas is out on the ice. He has, after this game, 18 points on the power play so far this season, which is less than half of his points as a whole, but quite a few. It's more points than the Kraken have on their power play this season by a healthy margin, so that should tell you everything you need to know about how these 2 power plays have differed to this point in the season. And unfortunately, it is exactly that one player that the Kraken can't afford to lose track of, that they do lose track of, as Necas gets it at the blue line, transitioning into the offensive end, catches the entire Kraken penalty kill flat-footed on their heels. He gets past everybody, up to the net. Decord goes for the poke check. Necas makes a nice quick-handed move to put it past the stick of Decord through the 5-hole and into the net to tie things up at 2. And so here we go. The Kraken, after outplaying the Hurricanes all game long, or certainly at least in the second period, the vast majority of the game so far to this point, have a tie game, and with this being Carolina, the way things have been going lately, it felt like the inevitable was that Carolina would take the lead and find a way to win this game that It really felt like for once the Kraken had gotten the better of their opponent in. And sure enough, a few minutes later, Carolina does take the lead. Another defensive breakdown in transition for the Kraken allows two Carolina players to get behind the entire Kraken defense. The pass gets to one of them, and from a tight angle, he puts it in past Decord. Of course, looking at the screenshot, you might be wondering why Decord is so badly out of position as this shot comes off. It wasn't a one-time shot. He had the puck on his stick for quite a while there, long enough for Decord to react and get to that far post. And as it turns out, what the Kraken also saw, and it wasn't necessarily a guarantee, I think this was a fairly close call, but the Kraken take the risk, challenge the play for goaltender interference, and we know the history with the Kraken and goaltender interference challenges one way or the other, no matter who's making it. But they find goaltender interference. It turns out the reason Decord was so out of position was that Robinson, the guy that scored the first goal on the Kraken, does make contact skate on skate just at the top of the crease as he's kind of curling away to the play the other side. That pushes Decord to that side and doesn't allow him to get back to that far post. So as the shot goes in, Decord didn't have a chance to fully play his position. The goal comes off the board. And then right back the other way, it's the Kraken with the puck into the offensive end. The line that started it all, Beniers and Schwartz in on the forecheck. Beniers gets to it first. Schwartz ends up with it. He fires it to the front of the net, where Gord has seen what's going on in the corner, realizes that there could be a chance going to the net. He skates up, gets himself just in position. The puck is kind of bouncing on end. It gets deflected on its way to Gord. So although the pass still does get to Gord in front of the net, something that, for one, we've been wishing the Kraken would do a lot more of, getting in front of the net. It is a bouncing puck. I think it's even in the air by the time it actually gets to Gord. Thankfully, though, he channels his inner Mariner, or maybe a team that can actually hit the ball, makes perfect contact with it, swinging at the puck in the air, blasting it into the back of the net to give the Kraken the 3-2 lead. Just like that, where just a few minutes ago we thought the Canes had the 3-2 lead, a goal gets taken off the board. Gord the other way puts one back on the board, but in the Kraken favor. And this is a lead that they would not relinquish. And even better yet, the Kraken regained that momentum that they had in the second after this third goal goes in and maintain it throughout the rest of the third period, or at the very least until the Canes go empty net with pretty much exactly 3 minutes left, at which point the Kraken now have a 4-2 lead thanks to just a few minutes after the 3-2 lead was taken by Gord, a breakout pass in transition. It's Winterton who gets it up to Tanev, and Tanev just out hustles, or I guess is just flat out faster than the two Carolina defensemen on either side of him. He gets to the net on the breakaway, makes a nice little move instead of just trying to straight up shoot it, which we've seen Tanev miss a lot of shots on the breakaway. Instead, this time he goes for the dangle, is able to get it as he goes forehand to backhand and through the 5-hole to give the Kraken the 4-2 lead, also giving Winterton his first NHL point with the primary assist. Like I said, the Canes eventually go empty net. The Kraken, on a few attempts, missed the net on either side. Lots of icings there in the last few minutes, as even the last 30 seconds turned into a longer portion of overall time than chunks of this game. It was a game that moved along pretty quickly until those last few minutes, almost like a basketball game in that way, though icing instead of constant penalties. Either way, the Kraken are able to ice the rest of this game away quite literally to get to that 4-2 final score, and their first very much needed victory in quite a while. All in all, then, with this game, I don't really know what more needs to be said. The Kraken just play a fantastic game, the type of game that we've been hoping that they would play more consistently throughout the season. We've seen it in bursts. We saw it throughout that 6-game home streak where they won 5 of the 6, but then it'll just disappear for a week or two at a time. Things had gotten a bit sloppy even before these last 3 losses, but while it would have been nice for this play to come back after maybe 1 loss rather than 3 against beatable teams, it's nice to see it finally back, and hopefully it sticks around throughout the rest of this road trip. If it does, they have a pretty good chance to come out of this road trip maybe back at 500, which would still mean they have to go 2-1 in the 3 games in New York and New Jersey, which is still going to be difficult, very possible, but it won't be easy. I think pretty obviously, though, the big takeaway from this game, though, is the performance of the team defensively. Again, they did have a couple of blunders. One that cost them, if you want to count the penalty kill 1-2, which, even though you're a man down, that's still a blunder that you really shouldn't be making with 4 skaters on the ice. So yeah, we probably do count that one. And at that point, I think there was probably 3, maybe 4 big defensive blunders that I could think about in this game, which is significantly down from previous games. 2 of them cost them, the first one there in the first period, and then the one on the penalty kill. 2 others don't end up costing them. One, which came off the board thanks to some contact, which, you know, maybe Decord makes that save. Even if he makes the save, though, that's still another Carolina player behind your entire defense getting a wide open shot on the net. So even with that one coming off the board, not great defense. And then there was another one where Dunn threw a puck up in front of the net right after Decord had handed it to him from behind the net. So there's no goaltender in the net, and Dunn throws it right to a Carolina player in front of it. Fortunately for Dunn, the Carolina player was just as surprised as anybody and didn't get a shot off. Otherwise, it would have been just a tap into the net. So the Kraken got away with that one there. Otherwise, Dunn had an absolutely incredible game. Maybe more so than anybody else on the ice. It was very clear how things looked different with Dunn, especially in the breakout, than without him over these last, well, almost month. And I suppose I might as well use that to transition us into the Kraken 3 stars in this one, as always brought to you by the patrons over on Patreon. If you want to help decide the Kraken 3 stars after every game, and fortunately this time we do actually have stars to hand out, and you can support a little bit more than you already are by watching this point by going to the link down below and supporting on Patreon as well. The first star for me has got to be Vince Dunn. He doesn't get on the score sheet as much as in some of the other players, well, specifically that Beniers line with Gord and Schwartz, but he still was, to me, the biggest difference maker on the ice for the Kraken in this game. We didn't really get to see as much of it in the first game he had back, the one at home against the Sharks on the second half of back-to-back. There might have been a little bit of rust for him to knock off there, obviously not playing in right around a month coming back from that injury. Even though he played 26 minutes in that game, he was back up, I think even above 26 minutes in this game, and looked every bit of the Vince Dunn, the best of Vince Dunn that we've seen over these last few seasons. Which unfortunately then just leaves 2 more star spots for 3 or maybe even more than that deserving players in this game. The first one, though, I've got to go with Matty Beniers. He looked really good in this game. He doesn't get one of the goals. I mean, neither did Dunn. So 2 guys that didn't have a goal in this game are going to get my first 2 stars. But Beniers looked very good out there, especially in transition, able to get the puck into the offensive end. And then in the defensive end, one of his better games along the boards that he's had in quite a while. That's a part of his game that while he still has been good in the defensive end, he's not the biggest guy, at least not yet anyway, and does on occasion get pushed off the puck along the boards in those battles, but he was pretty good there, helping create some of those breakouts, was good on the forecheck, helping to create that 3rd goal for the Kraken, the eventual game-winning goal for Gord. So it just a really good game from Beniers centering that line that was the highlight of this game. And then the 3rd star, you could go with either Schwartz or Gord to me, the 2 guys that both have a goal and an assist in this game. I'm going to end up going with Gord just because, well, obviously he gets the primary assist on the first goal, but then more so, his second goal is going to the net, just the awareness that you didn't need to go into the corner to help Beniers and Schwartz. He could recognize that they had that taken care of. They were likely to come out with possession there, so what he needed to do was give them somewhere to put the puck. That's exactly what he did by going straight to the net. And although it could have easily bounced past him, it was a wildly bouncing little rubber disc of galvanized rubber that could have gone any different way. He was able to whack it out of the air into the net to give the Kraken that difference-making goal. But beyond those 3, obviously there's any number of other guys. Schwartz, like I've already mentioned, Winterton getting his first point in the NHL, Tanev with the goal. Larson also looked really good. So I would say maybe his best game of the season, certainly one of his 2 or 3 best games of the season. And I don't think it's any coincidence that that comes in Dunn's 2nd game back. I think Dunn, as the other side of Larson there in that defensive pair, makes a huge difference in Larson's play. I mean, not necessarily what he's doing, but more how what he's doing ends up impacting the game, as he can be that solid force on the defensive end, get the puck to Dunn, and then allow Dunn to do his thing in the breakout and creating offense back the other way. As always, though, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section. And also, before we close things out, the next 3 R&Rs are going to be different from any other R&R I've done so far. I'll be on the road for the next 3. I'll be going to each of the next 3 games in New York, and New Jersey, or actually it's New York, New Jersey, New York, but either way, I'll be at these next 3 games. So the R&Rs are going to look a little bit different, probably a little bit more scatterbrained, less detailed. I won't have as much time to record them and then get things edited. So bear with me for these next 3 R&Rs. We'll try things out and learn as we go and see how that works. There might be another road R&R coming up later on this season, so yeah, we'll see how it goes. Should be some fun, and until then, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.